The Rams get absolutely demolished in week one. What went wrong and can it be fixed? That's on Locked On Rams.
You are Locked On Rams, your daily Los Angeles Rams podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Rams your first every single day. Free, available wherever you get your podcasts. My name is Travis Rogers. Not only do I host this Locked On Rams cast, but I am fresh off of doing the Rams pre-half and post-game show on week one right here on their flagship station, ESPN 710 in Los Angeles. And my, oh my, what an opening act in the worst possible way for the Rams. We're going to get into a lot of that coming up. But after you click that subscribe button on your podcast feed, make sure you get it in your feed every single day, and check us out on YouTube as well. Our Locked On Rams YouTube channel is a great way to take in the podcast as well. So here's what I want to get to on the pod today. Just coming up in just a little bit, we're going to talk about just some observations, some very quick little things, some first take kind of opportunities on the things we saw in week one inside SoFi Stadium. I saw some things tonight that were, well, shall we say, disappointing. And some other things that, maybe not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but things you're not hoping to see right out of the chute. One very big name player on the Rams had a very, very bad night in week one. That's right around the corner. But first, let's start right here. Let me remind you that this podcast is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so let's get right to it. They get absolutely bombed out tonight, SoFi Stadium. It was an interesting vibe in this whole thing, because leading up to it, it did feel a little bit like a playoff game, that you had two very good teams. You had two teams that I think both would probably consider themselves Super Bowl contenders. It is the opening of the NFL season. It is a standalone primetime game. And, of course, the Rams are unveiling their Super Bowl championship banner from a year ago. So it had a certain amount of buzz, and then the game started. And it absolutely did not have any of that buzz. Buffalo did. Buffalo had some bounce. Buffalo had some zip. Buffalo had some passion. Buffalo had that sense of urgency that you would like to see right out of the chute. The Rams did not. The Rams did not have any of those. Look, the fact of the matter is, and this is where I want to start, the Rams offense had one drive. Note, one. Okay, this is in season. The game plan is you're going to come out. You've got your hands full with the Buffalo Bills, and you have one offensive drive. And this was something that happened in the second quarter. It took a fourth down conversion to get it. The one decent run that Darrell Henderson had to get in some very nice pass from Matthew Stafford to Cooper Kupp in the back right for their only touchdown of the night. That right there took me about, 10 seconds to say. Those are your offensive highlights. The offense was dreadful tonight. And it wasn't just that Matthew Stafford threw 3 interceptions. It wasn't just that he got sacked 7 times. It wasn't that they only scored 10 points. It wasn't that the offensive line was unbelievably bad. It wasn't group of running backs were unbelievably underwhelming. It was all of these things that happened in a 3-hour span at SoFi Stadium tonight. It was something else. It was very, very disappointing. Just from an execution standpoint, from a crispness standpoint, certainly from a can this be fixed standpoint, because let's start right here. Let's start with that offensive line. This is something that from the moment that Andrew Whitworth retired and the moment that Austin Corbett decided to go to the Carolina Panthers in free agency was going to be something that we're talking about with the Rams, that you have 40% of your offensive line is new starters at least. Both Coleman Shelton and Joe Noteboom have been with the Rams. This is not their first season here. Neither one of these men are rookies. And in Joe Noteboom's case, he's played a lot of football for the Rams. He has started numerous games for them over the last few years. But this was his first start as the left tackle of the Los Angeles. When they drafted him several years ago, this was going to be his job. Now, he had to wait a little bit longer than I think anybody probably imagined because Andrew Whitworth certainly was playing at a high enough level for a long enough time that delayed Noteboom sliding into this role. I said it here on the podcast a million times that I wasn't so worried about him as a football player, about the void in leadership that Whitworth's retirement was going to leave, and where was that going to come from? Well, we can start worrying about the football portion of it too, because Joe Noteboom not have a good night. He really did not. You had Von Miller kind of giving him the business. Now, if you want to look at this through rose-colored glasses, if you want to look at this through silver linings kind of lens, Von Miller gives it to a lot of guys. Von Miller is a first ballot Hall of Famer. Von Miller is a multiple-time Super Bowl champion, but that's not how you're hoping to make your Ram debut as day left tackle, kind of having a really rough and not being able to hold it down. Let's go to Coleman Shelton. Again, another guy that did not have a particularly strong night. And maybe individually, none of them were particularly strong, but collectively, it was an underwhelming performance as well. They gained 59 yards on the ground. Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers and the rest of the guys that they would hand the ball off to over the course of the night, they gained less than 3 yards per carry. That is simply not going to do it, because all of a sudden the Rams were right back where they were when things really weren't working for them for that period of time last year, which is they're empty in the backfield the entire time. Matthew Stafford has to do everything. He's got to find Cooper Kupp in difficult coverages, and you know that the Rams became incredibly one-dimensional. Well, that's what they were tonight. The offensive line was not able to create any sort of space for Darrell Henderson or Cam Akers. Just nothing at all. It just wasn't there. And they weren't able to protect. Maybe, if you got to pick your poison, you can say, all right, maybe we're not a great run blocking team. We're not creating a bunch of big holes, but if nothing else, at least we're keeping our quarterback clean. Matthew Stafford got sacked 7 times. He was under pressure all night long. Now, here's what you can say. These guys haven't played a lot of football together. These guys have not played in a competitive environment together, these 5 guys, and it will get better. And I believe it will get better. But this was a very inauspicious start. This was not what you were looking for. And let's continue to talk about some of the things that went on in offense, because it wasn't just the offensive line. It wasn't just the running backs. It wasn't just that Allen virtually nothing going at all tonight. Cooper Kupp had a pretty good night, but there were some things that really makes your eyebrows go up and say, I thought that this was going to be a lot better. And it wasn't only better, it was actually far worse than what you had before. That's coming up next on Locked On Rams. It might still be hot outside right now, but as you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people that you want to talk to faster and for free. You can create a job post in just minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then you add your job in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to word that you're hiring so your network can help you hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to. And did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Okay, so let's continue talking about some of the things on the offense that did not look good at all tonight. I think everybody was under the impression, certainly I'd put myself in this, that Cam Akers was going to be the guy that was going to get the chance to do the most for the Rams when it came at the running back position, that Darrell Henderson was going to back him up, and that we will see what happens after that. We'll see how they split carries moving forward. That was not the case tonight. Darrell Henderson carried the ball 13 times. Okay. He had 13 carries for 47 yards. It's about a 3.5 carry average. Not great, right? He did have an 18-yard run that set up their one touchdown, but he was not particularly good. And he was the only guy that did anything. Cam Akers, who was supposed to be the starter on this team, who did not play during the preseason, who did not participate in a lot of the situations because of some soft tissue injuries, 3 carries, no yards. Touched the ball 3 times, did not gain a yard for the Rams. And this wasn't that they gave him one series and he got hurt. This wasn't that they gave him one series and he was ineffective and they decided to go in a different direction. This was a play here, a play there, and then a play somewhere else. Just completely disconnected to the rest of the things that they were doing on offense. I don't know. We'll see as Sean McVay kind of continues to talk about these things. Maybe they were trying to nurse an injury, but the way that he was used, believe me, that's probably not what it was. This is going to be if the Rams can't run the ball, I don't care what team you are in the NFL. If you're one-dimensional, you are in very, very big trouble. And the Rams looked incredibly one-dimensional. And that one-dimension, and literally, and I'm not even talking run pass, I'm talking one dimension, meaning one guy. Cooper Kupp, 13 catches, 128 yards, and a touchdown. Fantasy numbers, yep, pretty good. As far as impact on the game, not so much. Now, he was the only guy that got anything going, really. Higbee has 5 catches. Darrell Henderson had 5 catches. That's all fine and dandy, whatever. Allen Robinson had 1 catch for 12 yards. Allen Robinson had only been targeted once in this game until very, very late in the fourth quarter. He only had 2 targets total. This is the guy that they went out and spent a lot of money. This is a guy that they went out and got and essentially replaced Robert Woods with Allen Robinson. This was a terrible debut for Allen Robinson. All the quarterbacks that you've heard me mention on this podcast, whether it's Blake Bortles and Andy Dalton and Josh Fields and Mitch Trubisky, and until he gets with Matthew Stafford, and just wait till he gets in a real offense with Sean. 2 targets all night long, and really only 1 during the course of the game where it still felt like there was an impact to be made in one place or another. That is a huge issue. Now, Matthew Stafford was speaking after the game, talking about how they really only played a couple of snaps of man-to-man, that it was mostly cover 2, and that they were playing some deep guys in the middle, and then Allen Robinson, they were kind of shading to his side, and okay, fine. I'm sure that there's some truth to all of this. 2 targets? They paid a lot of money to go get that guy. I'm sure he came over here thinking, I'm going to get, 10, 12 targets a game. I'm going to be the guy that's going to take some of the pressure off Cooper Kupp. Nothing? Now, again, this is the first week of the season. We're going to get to that coming up here in just a little bit. I want to be very careful not to overreact to too much of this stuff that happened first week, but that was a particularly big situation. As was, and let's go right here, the performance of Jalen Ramsey. Look, nothing lasts forever. Sometimes the decline is subtle and takes a while to be noticed. Sometimes you can cover some of your decline with technique, with experience, with intelligence. And then sometimes it's just, oh boy, that's not looking good at all anymore. It is one game. I am not saying that this is the end of the world. I am not saying that Jalen Ramsey is not going to have a very good season for the Los Angeles Rams this year. What I am saying is we have seen a series of games now going back towards the end of the regular season, going through the playoffs, whether it be in Tampa and Mike Evans, whether it be in the Super Bowl against the Cincinnati Bengals, and whether it was tonight where Stephon Diggs was giving him the business. Ramsey has not looked less cornerback in the NFL. When they went at Ramsey tonight, and I'm going to pull up some stats here, when they went at Ramsey, they are alarming. They completed 6 of those passes. They combined for 94 yards. One of those was a touchdown to Diggs along the way, and Josh Allen had a passer rating of 158.3 when he decided to throw the ball at Jalen. How many times have you heard me say the things that the Rams were really able to do? Having some inexperienced players, having some guys that you could maybe coach up through the year and give them some experience without worrying about it costing you too much at the early part of the season. Jalen Ramsey is going to take care of whatever's happening on the other side of the field. That did not happen tonight. an offense that really could not find time during this game. Look, it was tied 10-10 at the half, and I was in SoFi Stadium for the entire thing tonight. There wasn't 1 second in that. They scored a touchdown. They got a full 57-yarder from Matt Gay right before the end of the first half to tie it, and it felt like the Rams gotten 3 turnovers, and they were tied at the half. 3 turnovers at home, and you're tied at the half. That was not a sign, and we know what happened in the second half. 21-0 for Buffalo in the second half, 30-10 final score. There was nothing about that made you feel like it was going well. There was no momentum. There was no snap. There was no nothing. Now, the good news is it's 1 week. It's 1 week, and we've seen this happen before, and I'll tell you exactly where it happened when we come back on Locked On Rams. But first, let's talk about BetOnline. BetOnline.net, number one source for all your pro and college football betting needs and sports information this season. Find all the latest league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week games, which, by the way, had Buffalo favored, which, by the way, felt kind of weird at the time, which, oh, by the way, turned out to be exactly right because the Bills look like a mud team tonight. But that's why you got to go check out BetOnline. It's also your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. It's an easiest way to check in on all your favorite sports and events, Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, and golf. Go to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, so let's kind of talk about a handful of things that maybe aren't huge deals in and of themselves, but some observations from the first week here in the 2022 NFL season. Number one, Rams got smoked. Okay, happens. It's the NFL. Buffalo's really good. Rams kind of laid an egg in the opener, but I want to be careful that we don't overreact too much to one bad game, especially if that game is the first game of the season, because this you don't have to back, to the Terry Bradshaw era to find something that happened like this. The Green Bay Packers last year on opening night opened up the NFL season against the New Orleans Saints. Okay, 38-3. They lost 38-3. New Orleans and Jameis Winston lit up the Packers to the tune of 38-3. And the Packers like, wait, what? That doesn't look good at all. And how did the Packers finish up last season? They were 13-4. Okay. So this is not the death nail that it sometimes feel like. Until you've had a handful of games to really get a sense of what is working, maybe what is not working, and really kind of see his case. This is just a bad night or a trend. It's a little hard to differentiate between concern and disappointment. Right now, this feels like disappointment. They were unprepared for. It felt like a game that the energy that they needed as the reigning Super Bowl champions just was not there. Turn around in a couple of Sundays from now and you turn in a performance similar to what we saw on Thursday night against the Bills, against the Atlanta Falcons, then that turns into concern. That's not just, hey, that was Atlanta's not good. So maybe you caught the night, maybe they caught you on a really bad night, and those two things happened at the same time. That's how you get 31-10. Happens another time or two in the early part of the season. That's not just disappointing, that's concerning. So that's one thing to keep in mind moving forward. The first week of the season is a million miles away by the time you get to the playoff time. Go back to last year when we're talking about the Rams beating Arizona in the playoffs, and then Tampa, and then San Francisco in the NFC Championship game, and we know. How long ago does that opening act against the Chicago Bears feel? Feels like 10 lifetimes ago. That was the opening game of last season. Point being, this is not necessarily the end of the world. It was a bad show. Don't get me wrong. This is something that they cannot let fester. This is not something that you can let kind of grow roots, because you want to cut this out as quickly as you can. That's number one. Number two, and this really, really hits me in a certain way. I don't like it, but it's just simply true. The Rams' home field advantage at SoFi Stadium is incredibly marginal. And it is incredibly marginal, in particular, playing against a team that has a rabid fan base. The Bills Mafia was out in force SoFi Stadium. Okay, we saw it last year with the 49ers. And when you looked at it at TV, it might not have felt like it on Thursday night because most of the Buffalo people in that blue jerseys, which can, from a distance, very much look like a Rams. I'm here to you. At best, 50-50. Okay? And this was the night you're dropping the banner. You're the Super Bowl champion. The NFL over the last 5 years. And you heard Sean McVay post-game press conference. You heard Matthew Stafford talk about it. Had to go to a silent count in their own building on the night where they got to celebrate the Super Bowl championship. That's not good. And again, I don't think the Rams could do anything better to be where they are right now. Started when they came back in 2016, but it's a thing. Been here since the late 50s. The Lakers at the same time. USC has been in town, Los Angeles, around USC. So those to have the fan bases that they do, not a huge surprise. They're very successful for the most part. The Rams are relatively new, even though they have a history. They're gone for 22 years. It's going to take some time, but when you that Bills Mafia, the team that plays, 3,000 miles away in Western New York, kind of brings it home all over again. The hangover situation. Is it a bad night, or is there a Super Bowl fog that follows this team around moving forward? Another thing to keep your eye on as you get deeper into September, and then as we get into October, is this just a team that is affected with some malaise, or is this a team that just, they had a bad night against a good team? I tend to think it's the second thing, but I'm not discounting the first thing at all, because you have games coming up against Atlanta. You've got some in the first half of the season before your bye. And if those don't look quite right, then maybe you do have kind of a Super Bowl fog situation. One last thing before we go. We'll spend this coming up later on next week once we get back into it and start getting ready for week 2 against the Braves. Atwell was terrible. Full stop. Bad. And here's how I know it was bad. They threw him the ball once early. Okay, let's go back a little bit. During camp, hey, Tutu's going to be a big part of this. Hey, we can't put him out there during the preseason because we got big plans for him. Okay. Hey, did you see that catch Tutu made in camp? Yeah. Hey, did you see, Tutu, he's got something to prove this year. Rookie season did not go well for him. He got hurt. He's too small, blah, 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 blah. He's going to show you something. Yeah. Well, he didn't show anything on Thursday night against the Bills. Not a thing. They threw him the ball one time early in the game. It was a good throw. He was open, and he dropped it, and they never went back to him. That's a really bad way to get started. Doesn't mean it's the end of the world, but that's a really bad way to get started, because you could tell last year there wasn't a lot of faith in Tutu Atwell. They didn't throw him the ball. They, even on kicks, it was like, here, just, don't get hurt and get silent. And he got hurt there, and it's just, whatever. Let's just move on and not think too much about it. They sang the Tutu song a lot early in the year. He was bad. He was bad on Thursday night. One opportunity, easy catch, wide open, on target, drops it. That's it. No deep threat. No sense of, hey, we can't let this guy get behind you. That was a very disappointing debut for his second season in the NFL. Not the end of the world, but certainly something that you'd like to see improved moving forward. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Rams. We'll talk about the debut of Bobby Wagner as well. That's coming up on the next one. Thanks for making us your first listen every single day. Of course, free and available wherever you get your podcast. Now make your second listen the Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022, an 8-episode extravaganza to get you ready for the NFL season. Local team experts on the Locked On Podcast Network, plus a betting angle from Lee Sterling of Locked On Bets, all combining into one ultimate NFL preview. Search for Ultimate Pro Football Preview 2022 on your Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Until next time, whose house? It's Locked On Rams house.